Aloha. Good afternoon. So, I am the statewide physical activity coordinator, and I know you had lunch and then you sat for like an hour plus, so I'm going to ask you all to just bear with me for like 20 seconds. Everybody who is able, please stand up. And this is very, sorry, straight from the mic. This is very kind of do what you feel, but my only mild encouragement would be maybe just be like your favorite tree incarnation, but just stretch it out and, you know, I mean, sitting is sitting, but yeah, there you go. I like those trees. Yep. All right. Okay. Yawning's okay. I won't be offended. It's okay. Oxygenate. All right. Okay, guys. Cool. Thank you. I had to. So anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for sticking it out. I know it's been a lot of information. I'm honored to be here. This panel is extraordinary. I'm very privileged to be a part of it. And what I really want to do in the next 5-6 minutes here is not just draw some of those direct and indirect connections between tree canopy and health and well-being, but also just spend a little bit of time thinking about where that increase needs to happen and who needs to benefit from that increase. So I kind of punnily named this tree equity, but really talking about how we can make this increase meaningful. I know that many folks today have spoken about this. Ian, you set this up so well this morning. I know most people in this room could probably give hours of conversation about all of these. But the reason I have this up here is really to just reiterate that as folks in the public health and planning field, we very much feel like all of these benefits and all of these sectors are health and well-being and do sort of transcend the economic, environment, and social impacts of a tree canopy. I do just want to take one more step, kind of deep dive and say, well, a lot of these are ones you're probably familiar with. I think there are some of these benefits that we don't always think about. We do know that trees can slow a road down and make it safer. We do know that trees can increase business. We do know that trees can actually help people feel better in hospitals and decrease medical costs. There are so many, step or two down the road benefits of trees that we don't even think about. So just to sort of amplify that idea of a benefit. And then I think that really is just to set up the conversation about who is benefiting from this. I think a lot of you are probably familiar with the idea that a lot of well-intended planning has unintended consequences, and then a lot of times the better you make that community, the less the people that were there can actually afford those benefits in that community. And so we often have what you can sort of see, I apologize for the blurriness of these maps, but you can sort of see here in that this larger map is showing you the tree canopy. It might be a few years old, but you're seeing a tree canopy, and then this smaller inset map is actually income per capita. And if you could zoom in, you would see that there is actually a strong correlation between these two things. That wealth is often, and most of the time, an indicator of where your tree coverage is going to be and where those benefits are. The other point I want to make here is that this is often cyclical. So the folks that are experiencing these higher heats and don't have the resources and have the higher needs are therefore in a less resourced space because they don't actually have the added benefit, and so it then actually puts them in a more resource deprived setting than they were originally in. And so I think thinking about all these things and considering them as we move forward leads me to how we consider them moving forward from that planning and health standpoint, but really making sure that in our plans and strategies we've called these items out, that we've really not just acknowledged where those underserved areas are, but that we've prioritized them. That we've also, like many of you have already said today, think about the non-traditional partnerships. Think about how we can do this more cross-collaboratively and really pull in all of those sectors, including the community, including the private folks, and really making sure that as we incentivize and invest in an increase in our urban tree canopy, that we do so creatively and really across the board. I also think that revisiting the rules, revisiting what the ordinance and the codes say, and making sure that we haven't just at this high level said, hey, here's our dream, here's what we want to have happen, but that we make sure there's teeth underneath that, right? And that there's really the supports that we need to make those things happen. So going back and looking at standards, looking at guidelines, making sure that there's the alignment there that needs to be there. Same thing with, I think, budgets and programs and partners, as I said earlier, but really making sure that we look at those resources and we look at budgets and not just the city's budget, not just the state's budget, not just, you know, a developer's budget, but really seeing how we can get collaborative and creative and redevelop some of those programs. And lastly, I just want to leave you with this. I am an epidemiologist by education and training, so it needs to be data-driven. We need to be using the right pieces of data to drive this work, and we need to be using the right tools. And on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Asia, who's going to talk a little bit about both.
Hello, my name is Asia Yuri. Whoop. We're going back to the beginning. Here we go. My name is Asia Yuri. I'm with US EPA Region 9. I'm in the AIR program, and I'm located here in Honolulu, Hawaii. Today I'm going to talk briefly about heat islands, which Ian eloquently discussed earlier, but I'm going to bring the same slide back up so you can have a moment to look at it and talk a little bit about a few different tools out there. I'm sure there are many more, but I'll kind of show screenshots from a few of the existing tools that I know about. And lastly, I'm going to bring up one grant opportunity that I found when preparing for this conference. So heat island basics, as you may have gathered from earlier discussion, downtown and other areas where there's a lot of asphalt and concrete, it is warmer with less vegetation and trees. It's warmer, and it's not just warmer on the surface, but it's also warmer in the air. So when we're thinking about what tools to use, we need to think about both the air temperature and the surface temperature. So something to think about when we are doing more of the planning efforts and data-driven decision making. So heat island impacts, this has already been gone over, but energy use, air quality, and carbon pollution, and water quality. You know, the water quality is a big one here, and even Mayor spoke about it earlier about the stormwater runoff issues and programs, the consent decree and others, but this could be something that we could rally behind if we're looking for grant opportunities and funding from the federal government. It's already an area identified as somewhere that, and we have the coral reefs, right? So we really have the incentive and the motivation, so perhaps this is something we could focus on, even though there would be many, many, many co-benefits, right? But I'm just trying to throw these areas out to think about when looking for funding. So cooling the heat island, EPA actually does have an EPA heat island program, and Victoria Ludlow is our program manager. So I told her all about this conference and everybody who's involved, and she's very, very interested in learning more, would be happy to work with us if there's interest, and also if this group decides to move forward in working with any of these tools or applying for a grant, she can help connect us with resources in DC. So trees and vegetation, many different communities focus in different ways, but some things that have happened are tax abatement for planting trees during construction, resident giveaway programs, laws that require permits before removing trees, zoning requirements to have parking lots shaded by trees. So many tools in the tool chest, but some of these have been successful in other places. Okay, so these are screenshots because I wasn't sure about the internet here, but EnviroAtlas is an EPA tool. It's actually very comprehensive, so it's not just about trees, but any kind of environmental planning. You can go to this tool and learn a lot, and there's a lot of studies attached to it, so I encourage all of you to go and explore it. The interactive map is especially interesting. If you go to how to use EnviroAtlas, there's actually a link to example uses, and when you click on that link, there are 3 case studies that actually have to do directly with trees. So using EnviroAtlas to identify locations for urban heat island abatement, prioritizing tree planting in Durham, North Carolina. I used to live there. Managing clean air with roadway tree buffers. I mean, these are some of the different angles you can take when thinking about and exploring ways to encourage more tree planting in your community. Okay, iTree is another tool. This is something that USDA, who I also understand supported this conference through a small grant through the local agency, but iTree is also on the back table through the Citizen Forestry Program. There's like a Kailua example, but when you use iTree, you can do a lot of different things with it, but it's like any tool, it depends on the data quality, right? So my understanding is that some of the data that is pulled into iTree is somewhat outdated and somewhat incomplete, so it could be up to us to decide that maybe we want better data. And to do that, we should get together and really strategize about how to update that. Another tool that is talking more about the heat island, but the temperature is NASA has a tool. So there's a lot of federal tools that the feds usually, if you are a community that is now focused on trees and tree planting and things related to heat islands, if you go to them and say, we want to be on your map, they will respond. So even though we might not be on one of these maps right now, we could be if we ask. And if there's a real, we have the goals now, let's tell them, they might not even know yet. So just keep that in mind. And Tree Plotter, this is the local version. This is iTree, this is connected to iTree, and this is with local data. So I think if you're gonna write down any websites, this would be the one. It would be pg-cloud.com/Oahu, and that's the one that you can really zoom in. This is Manoa, this is UH, and it shows you, look at all the different trees. It shows you everywhere. And I went to my neighborhood and I looked at it. It's fairly accurate, but yes, we still need to, help it out and include more data. Okay, here's the grant opportunity I mentioned. All I did is I went to grants.gov, and I typed in trees, and I went through it, and this is what popped up, and it looks pretty appropriate to me. It's due April 30th. It looks like you would get between $75,000 and $200,000. There is a match, I think it's 50-50. This is what it's for. This is a little small, sorry, but it's very general, but it needs to be replicable across the US and other places and all of that good stuff. And then this is what the RFP itself looks like. So I would actually challenge you to consider either this RFP or applying for some other kind of funding. It's a great way to just get yourselves together, get yourselves organized. You may or may not get it, but it's worth a try. And with this new mayor's initiative, I mean, why not go for it? I also added 2 baskets to the table back there. One of them was for, I think we called it data mapping tools, and the other basket was for grant funding and something else fiscally related. If you're interested in either of those, and they're definitely connected, please put your name in the hat and maybe we can get some working groups and some next steps, but this is due April 30th, so thank you very much.
As we transition here, I wanted to just make a plug. If you haven't gone to the Citizen Forester table set up back there, I encourage you to and sign up and go through the training. Not only do you get to walk around with folks during the week or on the weekends and actually really enhance our ability to manage our own assets, but you get some pretty cool shirts that have some really beautiful line drawings. This particular one is a hala. The first one was Milo, and I got both, so it's great. I'm encouraged by this great crowd here today, and obviously the spectrum of the speakers, and thank you all for sticking around, and thank you to the organizers for even considering our office in participating in this important conversation. Okay. Thank you. The Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency was created by the wisdom of the voters of this island, who in November of 2016, via city charter amendment, decisively elected to create this office. So the name is very long. The mandate is pretty broad. You can go to resilientoahu.org to learn more about that. But we are very excited to get to work on guiding city policy around actions to address both the pressing challenges that we face as a result of human-driven climate change. Additionally exciting is that just a few months prior to the charter amendment vote, the City and County of Honolulu was also admitted into the Rockefeller Foundation's 100 Resilient Cities program. So we've now joined in a global network of cities working to address these 21st century challenges around urbanization, globalization, and climate change. And this award to the city brings us into this global network, as I mentioned, and it provides technical assistance to us as we work towards the development of a resilient strategy, which every city that's a part of this funding scheme must produce. So we're now partnered with 99 other cities, and you can see us there on the far side of the Pacific Ocean, but I'm also very excited to inform you that our newest best Australian friend, Mr. Ian Shears down here, the city of Melbourne, at the other far end of that map, is also a member of this network. And we're very excited to learn about that forestry strategy program, and if you're not familiar, their resilient strategy, so they were admitted several years before us, highlights their forest strategy program as a flagship action. So we're very glad to now be part of this network and have the opportunities to continue to share and benefit from that learning network. So being in the 100RC network provides us quite a bit of things. It gives us access to technical support to produce that strategy, but it also provides access to over 100 private, nonprofit, and academic institutions and partners that we can tap into for pro bono services around specific areas of needs. And if I understand correctly in the reading of Melbourne's Resilient Strategy, they've already tapped into services provided by the Nature Conservancy at Trimble, focused around some of the data, coordination, and mapping needs, as well as financing opportunities to support and facilitate the execution of the urban forest strategy. And the way that we talk about resilience, it can be kind of heady, it can be a bit academic, but we really try to think about it through these shocks and stresses, where a shock is kind of that episode, it's this moment in time, it's a punch to the gut where the consequences can be pretty severe, but hopefully we've set in some processes that those impacts diminish over time, and we have some mechanisms in place to recover and bounce forward. But it's those stresses that are really those underlying burdens that sap our neighborhood, our household, our community, our governmental viability, and it just brings us down, and it really challenges our ability to cope and perform in those moments of crisis. In the context of today, we could think about a heat wave being a shock, but the continuous increase of heat and our surface temperatures as this stress and an impact from global climate change. And these shocks and stresses are obviously compounded by human-caused global climate change. And we know the driver of climate change, and we know that we need to both rapidly mitigate the sources of that contribution as well as act to adapt to the known and forthcoming impacts and consequences from climate change. And we're all pretty familiar with the foundational science, which was done here in the state of Hawaii on Mauna Loa, top of the Big Island, that foundational observation. And we know that it's charting pretty well with other global observations. So increases of global temperature since the late 1800s. But the impacts are felt here too. So you're not again, notwithstanding some of the really pleasant sleeping weather that we've been experiencing lately, we've seen, particularly on the right-hand side, a severe increase in warm nights. So it's not just the daytime where it's warm, but it's the fact of the surfaces and our inability to re-radiate that heat back out that's keeping our evenings very warm. And we've seen this stress as well. If you think back into, I think it was 2014 or 15, the summer at that time, HECO was advising people, really pleading and asking people not to turn on their air conditioners because of the stress that it was putting on our own electrical grid. So these concerns are known and they're here as well. And the ability to determine what trajectory our future condition takes will depend on how we act or how we don't act. We've already seen here in the state at least, I'm not sure what self-advance is, at least a 2 Fahrenheit increase in temperature since the early 20th century. And I think we all understand this, that with business as usual, the future's looking hot. And the future base condition can be experienced and is evidenced here. So these two data points are actually from our very own Professor Tom Donnell. The image is just street view, but he, in September of 2016, was taking a stroll around Woodlawn and Lowry Avenue in Manoa Valley, and he recorded a nearly double-digit temperature differential between a shaded area and a non-shaded area at the same intersection. So if we're thinking about what that different baseline is, it's that one on the right-hand side. Thanks for that, Tom. So at a pretty high level, our office has several large initiatives that include the implementation of the requirements of our commitments to the Paris Climate Agreement. So that's doing our own greenhouse gas baseline inventory, setting our targets for reductions of emissions, and then what are the actions to get us there. We also have some pretty rapid moving action around improving efficiency of city facilities, including our own city fleet. And we also, I mentioned the connection into the Rockefeller Foundation's program, the production of the resilience strategy. Specific to our urban forest though, we all heard the mayor's commitments around the Chicago Climate Charter, so a specific number by a specific year with that additional canopy cover by a specific year. But I really appreciated the panel just before us alluding to how do we think more about the collective investments, and we saw it's not just that Melbourne had an urban forestry strategy, they had all these different components and all of this data-driven information that built into a strategy. So we are also committed to developing an open space and green infrastructure investment plan, and we hope to benefit from a lot of that information. And you know, we heard about this. It's not important that you see this, but I tried to do just a quick keyword search of trees in our ordinances. There's certainly many in the room that are much more practiced and informed about this. I'm looking at you, DPP cohort over there. But you know, some of the questions that were posed to us were how do we encourage community planners to get more trees, or how do we encourage community to be supportive of trees? Well, sometimes wishes and hopes don't get it to you, and sometimes you really need rules and regulations. At minimum, this is a pretty logical next step. We heard comments around design specs and standards, so I think as a component of that green infrastructure plan, this is clearly something that we can embark upon, and I'm happy to say, I'll share this with all of us now, because we all recognize city staff is pretty taxed, but we're going to have a summer fellow that's going to be working pretty exclusively on some of those large mayor's commitments, and that's in partnership with my old institution at UHC Grant. And this also seems a good moment to discuss support of the programs. We heard Danielle talk about thinking not just of city budgets, not just of government budgets, but what are the ways that we can all get involved? Because we know that investing in the urban forest is really an investment in all of us, and it's an investment in our future, and we know that regrettably the trend line is down. And if we think about that, specifically that 100,000 by 2025, and I might have heard this wrong because Brandon said a different number, but anecdotally Terry Koike with Urban Forestry said in a maxed out super good year, maybe urban forestry or DPR gets 4,000 trees out there. How many trees per year do we need to plant to get to the 100,000, which is 7 years from now? We're roughly talking 14,300 trees. So it can't just be the city. That seems not possible. And if you think about the decrease in the urban canopy, the data from the change detection analysis tells us that we lost from 2010 to 2013 at least 76,000 trees. And these are pinpricks across the community. They're not large lots being cleared for redevelopment. It's some of those images that the arborists were showing us from residents, businesses, etc. And trees are more than just wonderfully beautiful friends. They are hard at work. And while we must acknowledge that these natural assets can and do have physical and fiscal impacts to our other built environment, trees are one of the few pieces of urban infrastructure that increase in value over time. We heard from Steve Nims that at the point in time that this tree is doing exactly what we hoped it would do, everything tells us that we potentially have to diminish its capacity to do that. So we really need to figure out ways that we're thinking about asset management and helping them to help us. So what do we choose to do with our limited resources, both space and money, and what's our vision and path moving forward with the known need to both mitigate and adapt to climate change? This is a little bit of cheating because I'm including both city and state road right-of-way here on this island, but there's more right-of-way than city parkland on this island. And that right-of-way is all of our collective public space. So if we're thinking about the things and the opportunities to make connections across community, how do we envision this moving forward? Because there really is a strong case for changes to our most connected public spaces, our streets. Contemporary planning and design acknowledges that we've overbuilt and undervaluated certain aspects of the right-of-way. And if our rules and practices don't change, we will continue to do so. And here's just an intersection at South King Street and Eisenberg Street in Mo'ili'ili, and with very little material investment, the city is testing out a modification to that intersection, provides shorter pedestrian crossings, reduced vehicular turning speeds, better visual communication among all the street users. The accessibility and safety is greatly improved, but this also highlights that there are areas of excess. So we think about that overbuilt, we heard about diets. We don't want to belabor that point, but I think we can all envision some of these areas across our community where perhaps there's excess pavement. And what are the opportunities to use that excess pavement, because it is our public resource, our public assets, to incorporate more trees and things around stormwater management. And I think that's where I'll just hand it off to our next speaker, one of my colleagues from the city's DTS. She'll talk more in detail about complete streets. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nicola Chabot, and I'm a senior. And I'm a senior transportation planner in the Department of Transportation Services. And I'm here to turn a new leaf with our Complete Streets program. So I just want to say that I really believe that complete streets are green streets. I'm a planner, and so I come to Complete Streets with a holistic perspective about what our streets should have, and that does include trees. And here's our picture. This is for Kevin of the center median in Kailua with the pedestrian refuge. So we do have it in this session this afternoon. And as a planner, I'm really passionate about data-driven processes and designing our streets with data in mind. And I thought Ian's presentation this morning that had lots of data visualization in it, regional maps, city scale maps, corridor plans. I thought that was really fantastic. And you know, to move ahead with things, we really need to have a good planning rationale, okay? We can't just rely on engineering judgment. We need to have a planning rationale. So that's how I come to Complete Streets. So this is the outline of what I'm going to speak about today. I'm going to talk a little bit, gloss over the Chicago Charter and the Honolulu commitments. What are complete streets? I'm going to talk a little bit about our manual and some guidance in the manual. I'm going to talk about our complete streets umbrella, who does what, because it's been a little bit unclear about how complete streets actually functions within the city. And then I'm going to talk about 4 different areas of effort we're engaging in on tree planning and end with our future goals. So in December 2017, Mayor Caldwell signed the Chicago Climate Charter, and this basically also established some very specific Honolulu commitments, which included establishing a complete streets policy, shifting to zero and low emissions fleets and public transit systems, increasing dedicated bike lanes by 40% over the next 5 years, although bikeways are not just what complete streets are about, they're also about trees and pedestrians and transit and vehicles too. Okay, so moving on. We are also going to develop an open space and green infrastructure investment plan, as Matt mentioned, and plant 100,000 new trees by 2025. Piece of cake, right? We actually already had a Complete Streets ordinance in place, which was passed by council in 2012, and it established the Complete Streets policy for the city and county of Honolulu. And within our manual, we have 10 objectives for complete streets. Objective 10 states that the city will incorporate trees and landscaping as integral components of complete streets. So why do we do this? I want to hear some answers. Why? Are trees and landscaping integral to complete streets? Go.
Slow bicycles.
To make it cool for the pedestrians, etc.
Cooling, yes. What else? Beauty. Oxygen. What else?
Stormwater management.
Stormwater management. Great. Okay. I hope that woke you up. So those are some of the benefits you mentioned. I just want to emphasize that the research shows that trees as vertical elements in the streetscape slow traffic, okay? So there is a safety benefit to street trees. And it's, as somebody already mentioned, I believe it's important because they are buffer between the pedestrians on the sidewalk and cars. And then also thermal comfort was mentioned, so we want to have cool streets and we also want to have beautiful streets. So complete streets are safe, as I mentioned, and convenient for people of all ages and abilities from Kiki to Kapuna. And they're streets for really everyone, and they're also context sensitive and integrated with the community's vision and sense of place. They support community health and transportation equity, which is what Danielle was talking about. So equity is a big issue that really hasn't been addressed, but I think we really need to focus on it the next few years. And complete streets also encourage a shift to active and zero emission modes. And importantly, they also support ecological connectivity as they integrate green infrastructure into their design. Complete Streets specifically support ecological connectivity through Chapter 9 in our Complete Streets Manual, which is titled The Streetscape Ecosystem. The manual was approved by the administration in 2016, and Chapter 9, the guidance in there on the streetscape ecosystem, includes a section on urban forestry where it delves into the principles for street trees and other guidelines for climate and soil, planting sites, species selection, and tree spacing. So if you have never heard of this manual, I encourage you to check it out, www.honolulu.gov/complete streets. Thank you, Matt. That's a little plug for the manual, so it's out there. Now I'm going to talk about who does what. So this is kind of an heuristic device that we've developed for our Complete Streets program here at the city. There's 4 main departments who are involved in the implementation of Complete Streets. These include the Department of Facilities Maintenance, the Department of Planning and Permitting, our Department of Transportation Services, and the Department of Design and Construction. And underneath our departments, we have several regional plans for Oahu, which provide guidance for complete streets at the regional level. And last year, we actually kicked off Oahu's first pedestrian plan because we have no currently documented inventory of pedestrian facilities at the regional scale. So this is a really important document we're working on. The project purpose is to support evidence-based planning and decision-making by conducting an inventory of facilities and prioritizing pedestrian improvement projects at the regional scale. So this is really apolitical. We are looking at a data-driven process that is based on a technical analysis. The plan is going to identify areas with the highest improvement need by analyzing pedestrian demand, comfort, connectivity gaps, collision hotspots, and conducting an environmental justice equity analysis. The tree canopy is currently being assessed as part of the pedestrian comfort part of the model, as trees provide shade and increase the thermal comfort for pets. We are including an equity analysis as part of this. We're looking at the block groups for our minority and low income persons, and we're overlaying that with our comfort model, which the development is underway of this. So another area we grow the urban tree canopy is through our transportation impact assessments, where we provide guidance and check for compliance with developments. So we're actually moving towards a multimodal assessment transportation process at the city. We're switching over from a pure traffic impact analysis report model to a ped, bike, transit, quality of service, so I'm talking about comfort, okay, not level of service, but quality of service assessment. And our department is actually not responsible for street trees within the furniture zone. but we assist in providing guidance to the Department of Planning and Permitting with regards to the different complete street zones. Okay, and that includes the furniture zone, the pedestrian zone, and the frontage zone. And the DTS position is that we actually prefer a 6 to 8 foot wide continuous furniture zone, and that includes the space for the trees. So arborists, like, I fully support you, your 5 feet, like, come to me, I will go to battle for you over your 5 feet that you want, okay? So I completely agree with that. Another important point is that we want to have street trees near our bus stops, and so we take that consideration when we're planning for our transit stops. At a regional scale, we have developed this new street typology. So we want to move away from our traditional functional classification of streets, which prioritize vehicles, so our arterials, collectors, majors, minors. We want to move away from that typologizing and think about, okay, boulevards and parkways, streets with trees, right? Avenues, that's what you think of when you think of those street types. So that's what we're working on. We don't have the entire island assigned a street type at the moment, but we are going to do that through the pedestrian plan. We're going to assign all 1,080 miles of city and county roadways as one of these 7 street types. And then within the manual, we have a master design treatment matrix where we can see where the priority for street trees are. And really doesn't go into much more detail than this per street type, but I would actually like to have more detail when we do an update of the manual. So if you have ideas for what type of trees should go on types of streets, then we can move towards more of a regional framework planning for our street types and our street trees. So our responsibility at DTS is to review and request compliance with Chapter 9 of the Complete Streets Manual, so we end up with developments that have green infrastructure. And our standard comment is, we have a standard comment that puts the burden on the developer to adopt and maintain any landscape strips, vegetation, green stormwater infrastructure, and street trees as part of the Complete Streets Furniture Zone. And we also direct them to be compliant with the 2006 Urban Reforestation Master Plan that DPR has. Another area where we engage with the street tree canopy is through our Rehab of Streets projects that the Department of Design and Construction implements for us. So we have kind of more gray projects that actually focus on interim repaving and restriping. So that includes road diets, buffered bike lanes, 1- and 2-way protected bike lanes, curb extensions, and kind of the low-hanging fruit projects. And then we actually have a more comprehensive full right-of-way reconstruction projects where we want to integrate sort of heavier infrastructure like bus priority lanes, roundabouts, different parking configurations, wider landscaping and sidewalks, pedestrian refuges, and landscape medians, which include trees. So these are more of our greener efforts. And here's a little plug. We are having upcoming outreach for the repaving, restriping, and full right-of-way reconstruction projects. So March 22nd, come out for the Urban Core meeting. It's going to be at the Blaisdell Center, the Pukake Room. On March 22nd, so please come out for that. All right, and lastly, I'm going to talk about rail access and our street tree efforts. So we are considering new technology for our rail station access areas and transit centers that meets regional stormwater requirements using underground bioretention technology designed for tight urban spaces and also contains root growth so it doesn't pop up out of the ground like many of the arborists are talking is a big issue. So some of the cell technologies leverages soil and trees to provide water quality and pollutant control at the same time, deal with peak overflow reduction, and it's low maintenance and allows for the growth of big trees. And it's a modular suspended pavement system. So that's kind of something innovative that we're working on within our rail station access areas. And then The Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation also works on tree location within the right-of-way that they are completing, and so they've relocated 270 trees as of 2017, and they're replanting about 1,000 new trees. And we also see an opportunity for a partnership with them to move some of those hard trees into Complete Streets projects. And then I'm just going to end with our future goals. So as I mentioned at the beginning, Complete Streets are green streets. One of our goals for DTS is to become a member of the National Association of City Transportation Officials. And NACTO will really help us in terms of technical guidance and education for street designs that incorporate green stormwater infrastructure, and we're interested in leveraging partnerships to make our Complete Streets greener. And we look forward to being involved in these future efforts. And we also hope to update the manual, so if you have ideas for the manual, we're open to them as well. I'd love to hear what you think about that particular chapter. Yamato Sasaki and I work at DTS, so she's over there in the corner. If you have ideas, you can go to her or me. And yes, I will support you on your 5-foot wide tree wells if you want. So yes, go planning. Thanks.